Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Frames for Thought podcast. I am your local actor, Mark, and with me, as always,
Alex the Animator.
And today we're going to be talking about our own personal projects. How to do them? Do you want to do them? Are they fulfilling? Pretty sure you're going to know the answer to that last one. Let's go. Good evening, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So, creative endeavors.
Personal projects.
Personal projects, exactly. Things you can do on your own. Let's start with you, Alex. What kind of things do you have in the works?
Lots, I guess, is the answer. The creative mind, I find, needs to constantly be fed. It never really rests. I find that I have a lot of ideas. I'm really restless, and so I keep myself notebooks and sketchbooks, and I have a tablet that I draw on, so I can save digital files or animations or what have you. And so I'm always writing stuff down, and it's whether or not that idea is going to materialize into anything is another story entirely on its own. I have 3 kids, and so I find the timing is difficult. When is the right time for me to work on this? At the end of the day, when the kids are in bed, there are other things that I need to do first. It's just a matter of prioritizing, I suppose. Like, I have to do dishes, I have to do laundry, putting the kids to bed, reading stories, taking care of myself, all of that before I can embark on these personal projects. And so it's not so much about finding time, it's about making time for these personal projects. And as we kind of dive more into this, we'll kind of get into how to do that and what I do to make time for these sort of things.
Cool.
But how about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm in a different boat because I don't have 3 kids. But I do find what's most difficult is figuring out what you want to do, when you want to do it, and how you're going to do it. Those are sort of the issues that come across with me when it comes specifically to trying to come up with actor-based creative endeavors. A big problem with being an actor who wants to do their own thing is that you heavily rely on other people. There's
to feed off of in a scene.
Not even so much that, but if you want to, let's say you want to put something together for YouTube, right? You could do the whole thing of setting up a camera, doing a monologue yourself, and putting that up online. You can put that stuff online, but it's all about the traction and who's going to see it, and is it worth your time? Whereas if you get friends together, you can create whole scenes, and you can kind of create your own own TV show online with your friends.
Something that feels more full.
Yeah, exactly. You can actually tell stories. You can actually do an entire thing. Whereas when you're by yourself, you're very limited in what you can do. And so where you have the struggle of having a family to take care of, with us, it's making sure everyone's schedule lines up so you can actually make something happen, which is easier said than done in a lot of cases.
I'll go ahead and just kind of say that personal projects in general tend to be something that are hard and something that you kind of you pick at and chip away at over time before something is complete in a way that you think is yeah, I'm satisfied with that. Or maybe it's, you're one of those people who will never be satisfied with the end result, but something that you keep chipping away at for a long period of time that eventually will materialize into something like that.
Yeah, I think that's true for every kind of creative endeavor, whether it's music, poetry, whatever it is. That's 1,000% true. We're always very we treat our projects like our children, like our babies, and you never really want to let it go, but you always hit that point in the project where you're like, okay, I have to stop editing this, I have to stop doing this to it, I just have to let it out into the world and be what it is. And
that's especially true if you want it to ever get anywhere, with animation especially, you can do so many passes on a certain scene or draw it a certain way or tweak the timing in a certain way. But eventually, if you want your personal project to get made, you're going to have to move on from that.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to accept it in a certain state, whether you feel like it's ready or not, and then to go do the rest of it. And then once it's finished, it's something that you can revisit, right? But it's the idea of, to sound very Walt Disney, to keep moving forward.
I think you just gotta know when it's time to take the cookies out of the oven, you know? Like that's...
Yeah, don't burn them.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to burn them. You don't want them undercooked either, though. You just gotta know the right
'cause-
time for you to let it go and just put it out into the world and see how see how it goes. See what happens with it. And I know for me, when I was younger, I was very precious about a lot of my projects, even for school. Very, very precious about it, and I didn't want to let certain characters go. I didn't want to let certain things go. But then once you get to that point, it's like, okay, this is overdone, and the more you do it, the more you try it, the worse it gets. And so...
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's true for a lot of people as well. So they get really precious with their own projects, and it's their vision. They want to do it their way. And, you know, the whole idea of it being their personal project, I mean, that's kind of the foundation of it all, right? But if you find that you're struggling to get anything made or to make any progress on your project, and you feel like, if I had an extra hand, like, you know, you're saying more actors in your scene or in animation, it's like, oh, if I just had maybe, you know, somebody to help me with the coloring or with the clean lines or something like that. But then there's a part of you that feels if you let any piece of that project go, that it's no longer just your project, right? Like it loses some of itself. It's the ship of Theseus, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, to kind of like add up onto that, I know with me, I'm a very like lone wolf type when it comes to my own personal projects. I try my best to have nobody else involved just because I want to be in charge of what it looks like, what it sounds like, how the pacing is, and how all that is. And that's because it's exactly what you're saying, is that like you're giving those parts away. And again, this goes to me making things too precious, is I can't, it's not that I can't trust the other person to do their job. Like, obviously, if I'm asking them to help, I think they can do it. I just can't trust myself to not be overcritical or overanalyze or to feel like regret in some kind of way, just because I know how I want it to look. I know how I want it to sound. And so it's really hard for me to let that kind of stuff go. But you have to in the acting world 100%. If you're looking for something of a higher quality, you have to. It's just part of the gig. So I can set up
agree.
I can set up a camera in my room and I can film a whole bunch of stuff just by myself. But I can guarantee you right now it's not going to be as good as things I could make with other people.
I agree to a certain extent, and the only reason that I say that is because since you and I have both come through programs and have formal training in our respective fields, we learn early on as a student that your ideas on their own often suck, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have outsiders come in, or you present your idea to people that are outside yourself, they present new perspective. And that new perspective is what kind of breaks away the amateur from the pro, right? You get that outside perspective that says, nah, man, that's garbage. Or why not this? Or that twist doesn't really surprise me, you know? Like, if you had kept it secret until this moment or something, and then it gets ideas and creative juices flowing in you in a way that you otherwise may not have thought. And so I know that you and I have collaborated on projects before. And when I presented you with the initial idea, and then over the course of months and months and months, that idea evolved. And the first idea that I showed you was almost unrecognizable. And so when you're taking on a personal project and you're getting really precious about it, that's usually a pretty good indicator that you should get some outside opinions, get some extra eyes on your project, or even just voice it to get more opinions to whatever creative community you belong to. Because it's ultimately it's going to strengthen the piece, in my opinion. And that's really what separates the amateur from the pro, is that the pro is very well aware that initially in concept, it might be a great idea, but in order to execute this, I'm going to need help.
1,000% agreed. And to kind of add on to that, you're saying that like what your project was, like what our project was originally when you pitched it, is unrecognizable now. I remember after we took it to the studio, and they gave us their notes. And our first meeting we had a couple months after that, I remember we made a decision that eliminated a character that I came up with, and like the logic behind it was completely sound, but I still like had trouble letting it go. Like I still kind of sat there being like, is there a way I can kind of figure out to get this guy in? But like the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, Alex is right. These producers are right. Like, yeah, we gotta just cut the fat and get him out of there. Mm-hmm. And that just kind of, again, speaks to sort of me where I make things too precious. And also to go down that same road, I'm currently, one of my like private projects here is I'm trying to write a collection of short stories and poetry is what I'm currently working on in my own time. And I have a couple stories already written. And I know that at least one of them is at the point where I should really get somebody else to read it and give me feedback. But I'm so, I guess it's a combination of both feeling precious and like kind of terrified to let that happen, because again, it's my baby and I know what I want it to be. And if I give it to somebody and it doesn't come off that way, it might be a bit devastating, and that's where the scary part comes in. But that's what you need to do to make whatever this creative thing is better. I'm also waiting till I have more stuff to put out, because if they're short stories of poetry, they're like already short already. I don't want to waste somebody's time. So like here's actually like 3 things to go over,
right?
Instead of just like, here's like a 4-page story.
Yeah, and in the case of something like poetry, it would be worthwhile to get somebody who knows a little bit about poetry to look over it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you sent it to me, I'd be like, well, that's great, and here's my creative feedback about the piece. But as far as editing and the meter of the poem, like one of the things I remember from English literature when I took it in university was there were certain poetries that had something called an iambic pentameter, and I remember hearing terms like that in regards to poetry. And nowadays, that's not something, because I'm not versed in poetry, that's not something I would know to look for. But in the same way that you're working on a project where you're writing short stories and poetry, screenplays, and all that, I too have personal projects where I work on animation, but I want to make the animation my way, because I spend all day, every day, working on animation for other people, for other projects. When I was working in studio and feature film, I was working for a director who had a very specific vision of what the animation ends up looking like. When it all comes together, it looks great. Like Lego looks great. The Deep looks great. Some people will see Polly Pocket and, that looks great. And Carmen Sandiego looked really cool because of the way that we stopped using the black line and the hard edges. Anyway, I animate for these people all day long. The directors have a vision. The storyboard artists interpret the script, and then the storyboard is approved by the directors. So already, before I even start animating, the boards are in place, and it's expected to be done in a very specific way. So there's very little room for your personal flavor or embellishment at that time. Now I work in video games, and it's the same. I'm making a product. It's not my product, it's not my vision, but I help bring that vision to life. In my own time, I don't want to be making that, or Lego this, or militaristic shooter here, or that, the other thing. And so I'm taking the time to make my own characters, and I'm taking the long way around, because as an animator, when you're working on personal projects, sometimes you get a little bit tired of animating all the time, and sometimes you want to try something else, or sometimes you just want to bring it all together. You want to keep learning. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm learning how to model, I'm learning how to texture, and I'm rigging my own characters, and then I'm going to be animating them. And so I'm building the whole world that my characters are going to interact in. That in itself is bringing a different kind of joy to the personal project. I'm not trying to be precious about it. Anytime that I have a question, there are people that I work with that are so much better at doing the other things, like the modeling and the texturing and the rigging, for example, that if I have a question, I'll just show them the problem. And then they're much more likely to be able to give me a more competent answer than if I were to just spend hours and hours searching on Google, being like, how does this work? Or when I rig the face this way, why is it not doing this or that or the other thing? I'm really enjoying like the embarkment on the creative endeavors, but I find that the most difficult part is the timing. When can I work on this?
That's pretty common across the board, I find, because I know with me, working 8 hours a day in a warehouse where I'm lifting 20 to 50 pound boxes all day for 8 hours. By the time I get home, I don't want to do anything. Like, I have to force myself to work out. And that's another thing I like to do, but like that's one of the things I have to do constantly. So when it comes to my free time, I want to make sure that I can like relax, and you mentioned earlier, like take care of myself. It's really hard, and this kind of goes back again to why I'm saying it's so hard as an actor to kind of do these things, because if you need a crew, if you need like a camera person, director of photography, another actor, that's a lot of people. You have to line up your schedules. And let's just say the only day you can do it is a random Tuesday in whatever. And so you get home from work and you have to quickly shower. You have to grab something on your way out the door to eat so you can meet in the place and film it. That's going to be a lot of mental and physical effort on your part to make that happen. Obviously, it's rewarding. Like, I'm not saying it's like there's not a reason to do it, but it's just going to add some extra stress and some extra strain onto your life, because it's not like you can film something super quick all the time. Sometimes these film shoots can take hours, even if it's a simple scene. You had to kind of mentally and physically prepare yourself as you're doing all this stuff. And if you want the performance to be quality, you can't have all that like tiredness from work. I have to get up at 5 a.m., like Monday to Friday. That's very early for someone to get up. And so if I'm filming until 8 or 9 at night, and then I don't get home till 10 or 11, and then have to wake up for 5 the next day, that is a lot of mental and physical stress that's put on me to do this side project, which could or could not mean anything in the long run, depending how it turns out, depending blah, blah, blah. As important it is to kind of get your own voice and your own vision out there, you just have to kind of also understand it's not an easy thing to start. Like, what kind of things do you face when it comes to starting these kind of projects?
I'm quite good at starting them. The problem is finishing the project. And it falls into the same category that you're kind of talking about there, where it's like you work a full day, and then at the end of the day, you have to get into that mindset to turn on those creative juices and get going. But some people are more creative in the morning. Other people are more creative in the afternoon or the evening. And so if you're lucky enough to be able to build your schedule around your own creative time, then that's great. I would say if you're more creative in the morning, then try to work something out in the morning. If you're more creative in the afternoon, same. Try to figure it out there. When it comes to finishing my projects or even just working on them, it's the time management problem that I run into, because right now with COVID, I'm working from home Monday to Friday, and I start at 8 in the morning and I go till about 5, and then I come upstairs and I see my kids and I have dinner with my kids and my wife, and we eat dinner, we play, we have wind down, stories, bed. And then by the time my kids are in bed, it's, maybe after 8 o'clock. And then I want to spend some time with my wife, but at the same time, I want to keep my fitness up. And at the same time, I have all these creative endeavors that I want to embark on or finish or work on. And so you have to find a balance somewhere in there. And if it's important enough to you, you want to make the time. It's not about finding time, because time is there. It's always there. You could wake up in the middle of the night and work on it. Like, technically, if you were forcing yourself to find time, what becomes important is making time. And so my wife and I are really good about making time for each other and for making time for our own endeavors. Whether that's, for her, it would be training for a triathlon or road biking, and for me, that would be my running on most days, or sitting down at the computer to work on these creative projects or to play some games with some friends, sort of thing. And so I usually put aside at the very least one night a week to spend with my wife, at least. And then I might make another 1 or 2 nights a week to socialize with friends, and the other night would be to work on my creative project. But again, I'm not starting until my kids are down, and that's usually around 8:30 or so. And so you start late, you work on it for like an hour or 2, and then it's bed and rinse and repeat. I don't have as much trouble starting as much as it is like at the end of the day, same with you. It's like I don't really want to go back down there into my office and get started on this today. Or some days it's the opposite, like I'll really want to get started, but something will come up. You know, I'll have to be somewhere. One of the kids is sick, or you know, they're not staying in bed, or what have you, right? So I mean, there's all sorts of reasons for being able to stop and start. With you, the scheduling you were saying, and you know, you might be all psyched to get started and do your acting project, but then last minute the person you're supposed to go meet flakes out. And, you know, you put yourself in that mental state, getting ready to go, and then suddenly it's just, you're drained, right? It sucks all the wind out of your sails. So with my personal projects or any of the creative endeavors that I undertake, I understand that it's going to be quite an endeavor. It's not just I'm going to be able to sit and finish it in a single sitting. A lot of it is going to be, I'm going to start this and I'm going to get started, work on it a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more until we were talking about it at the beginning, until you're in that state where it's like, okay, I got to move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. The other thing that I don't do is, if I have the time to work on my personal project and I don't want to, I want to like my personal project. I want it to be something that I enjoy, and I want it to be something that when people see it, they go, yeah, he had fun making that. Yeah, that looks good. That's fun. You know, I don't want people to watch it, or even myself to watch it and be like, man, I hated that. You know, because it should be something that's like out of love, something out of passion, something that you want to create. And so there are some days when I have the opportunity to work on it, but I take a step back and I don't, because I'm not in the mood to do it right now, and I don't want to make the project sour. I don't want to dampen the project by getting frustrated at it because I'm forcing myself to work on this project, and then suddenly the project starts to feel like work, and you're going to distance yourself from the project. It's important to make sure that if you're in the mood to work on the project and you have the time, great. That's a perfect opportunity for you to work on the project. But if not, then it's okay to take a step back. It's a personal project, you know? You're on your own time. It's not a director or a producer breathing down your neck. I mean, I don't know if it's the same with you, but that's kind of my approach to it. It's if I'm not in the mood to work on it, I won't. And, you know, sometimes that's 1 day, 2 days, sometimes it's a week or even longer before I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to get back on that horse and try again.
Okay, so on two things that you said during this last bit, how you're able to kind of like, you know, when you sit down for the animation, you're going to get this much done, and then again tomorrow, and then tomorrow kind of thing. Like you have that sort of time spaced out where you can spend longer on a specific thing. Whereas in acting cases, for example, let's say you and your crew are able to film this one scene in a coffee shop after it closes because one of your actors worked there, and the guy who owns it's like, yeah, I'll let you do this Wednesday night, but that's it. That's all I can let you guys do. If you can't get everything filmed that night, you can't guarantee it's going to be able to be filmed later than that. So there's sort of this time crunch on things like that. Now, there are things you can do where it's like, you know, if you're just filming in your buddy's apartment, not a big deal. But something like that, it's like, it is more of a time crunch. And in regards to stepping back and making your project more about passion and not feeling like a day job, I find for me, what works best for me is, because most of the stuff I do solo stuff. And a lot of that is mainly just writing. And this is why I was sort of looking at stop motion before. I mentioned that in a couple podcasts ago, because then I can just kind of dictate it on my own. So when it comes to writing specifically, what I'll do is, when I come up with ideas for writing, it's usually when I'm going out for a walk, if I'm getting groceries, if I'm on the bus, or if I'm just bored at work. I'll think of concepts, I'll think of characters, I'll think of what I want to have happen to people, and that'll be sort of the genesis. And I'll kind of work that out in my brain. And then what I'll do is, on the weekends, I'll set aside half an hour to like an hour and a half where I'm like, all I'm doing, I turn off the phone, I turn off everything, and I just sit there at my computer and I just type, and just try to get as much of it on page as possible. Because what I find for me is that it's a slow start, because I have to like very much force myself to work on said project. But once I start, I can actually, I've done this before where I wrote a movie script, like a short film, in one sitting, because I worked out everything I wanted to see days before in my head. And so then when I set aside the time, I'm like, okay, so this Saturday, I'm going to spend at least half an hour just getting it on the page. and then the moment it starts getting on the page, it just starts flowing out of me, and I can just write the entire thing. And that was just the skeleton of it. I ended up doing like you get the whole. I wrote the whole skeleton in one sitting, and then I stepped away, and like that took me a couple hours to do, and then I stepped away, and then I think the following week I edited it down. Following week I did another edit, and then I think I sent it out to my friend after that. So that's how I sort of work on these types of projects. When it comes to like my film stuff, though, I try to when I used to do a YouTube thing, I try to get it all done, all the filming done in one night. So I try to keep things very short, try to keep it very simple. I'd film it all in one night, and then I would edit it either the next day or the next week, because the editing process does take a little bit longer depending on what you're trying to do. I kept mine simple, and it still took some time because you end up finding jokes, or depending what you're doing. For me, the style I was doing, I would find jokes in what I was doing, and so then I would start to kind of edit around the joke, and it was because I thought it was funny. And trying to get editing to be funny is another talent all on its own. So I spent more time editing than I did actually filming the project itself. I guess I'm the opposite of you, where I struggle starting, but then once I start, it's just like boom, 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 and I can see it right to the conclusion. I just have trouble.
Nice.
I have trouble pushing over that first domino, but then once it starts going, it just goes.
Yeah. See, I think the other part of the problem on my end is that I have a lot of ideas, right? And it's just I work on this one a little bit here and this one a little bit there, and so anytime that something is going to get finished, it's going to be a lengthy process, right? I shouldn't say never, but it's not always just one thing that I'm working on where I just have one idea and I execute on it. But usually it's many things, and that's when I spoke earlier to the creative mind. It's always kind of hungry, kind of needs to be fed, stoked like a fire. You don't want your creative juices to drain completely, and so one thing inspires another thing, inspires another thing, inspires another thing, which is another reason that personal projects can be so hard.
And see, it's funny. I don't share this with a lot of people. I keep this very private. I've been like secretly writing a comic book series in my head for like 5-6 years, just like how the story would flow. And so sort of for me, that's the kind of thing that I like to think about to kind of center myself into my projects. I don't think I'll ever write it because it's become far too precious to me now. It's that kind of thing I focus on in my brain to kind of help me think about other things. So I'm kind of like you, and I have a whole bunch of ideas just kind of flowing in my head around the same time, and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work can be a bit of a process. So it's nice to have that mental part of my brain where I can just go back into this comic book and just think about that stuff, because like I already know going through it, like some stuff doesn't make sense and some of the stuff is stupid, but it's okay because I'm never gonna like materialize it, and so I can just kind of enjoy it as it is.
Never say never.
I mean, well, hey, if Dark Horse wants to talk to me, I'll show you what I got. It's I don't know. I guess for me, I keep on going back in my brain that it just like all this stuff is just so precious to me. And
yeah, that's why I keep everything written down in a notebook, right? Because every so often, you're flipping through the notebook or the sketchbook or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I was thinking about that. That's cool. Maybe I'll try that right now. I'll try that right now, and I'll do the other thing later. When you say about the comic book and something that you can always revisit, it's similar to kind of like an epic idea. You come up with a concept and you build the world around it and the characters in it, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows, and then it becomes like this monument in terms of scale, and it just becomes almost overwhelming in a way where it's like, well, how do I even start working on this, right? And the idea is just start.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then all that's going to keep happening is it's going to keep growing, and you're never going to get started. So
well, yeah, and it's like I said about the writing I do. Like the moment I start, that's when it starts flowing out. If I never start, it just sits there.
And I, for a long time, used to suffer from analysis paralysis, where I would think and think and think and think and think and think, and then be like, but what if, and then the logistics of, and then it just never came to anything. But eventually I hit this point where I was like, nobody's going to do this for me. And if I want to do it my way, I have to be the one to do it. And so that kind of has been the latest fire for my creative projects, where it's just like, no, I'm doing this and I'm doing it my way. I'll be damned if anybody's gonna, make my character move in this certain way or that certain way. Like for my creative project, I am the director. All of the stuff that I do in this project is approved by me. I'm really trying to keep going with this project. With this particular one, I'm using Blender because A, it's open source and free, and B, it's extremely powerful and user friendly. So I'm building my character and he's modeled. I'm in the process of texturing him now, but then after that, it will be moving on to the rigging and the weighting and then the animation. And it's so interesting to me that I've hit this point because it just kind of came to a head where it was just like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm going to learn how to do it start to finish. If this is how I have to make my own show, then this is how I have to make my own show. And here we go, kind of thing.
Yeah, greatly respected. And you touched on a topic that I want to talk about tonight too, where like what kind of equipment you need to make your own projects. So you're saying right now you're using Blender. Is there anything else that you're using to help you create?
Nope. I'm using Blender on its own.
What about to draw it though? Using mouse? What are you using?
Oh, sure. I guess, yeah, I that is a bit more into the equipment realm. I have a tablet, like a pen display, so I can draw right on my screen. I feel like most artists have this or some form of this. It doesn't have to be a pen display. Obviously, it can just be a little tablet that you put in front of your computer. Wacom makes all those Intuos ones. Huion is another good brand. They make more of your budget type, but I use a Huion, and I don't know why people would pay so much money for a Wacom beyond whether or not it's if you need so much pressure sensitivity or like color matching, and that's really important to you, then that's probably worth the investment. But if you just need to crank out some animation and you want to work on some 3D stuff or whatever, then I think really any brand is gonna do the trick for you.
Cool. With acting, it's a lot different. So the first thing you would really need is a good camera. Fortunately, we're living in the times of really impressive iPhones and smartphones in general, and a lot of them will have a good camera to begin with. I actually use my iPod that I got a couple years back. It's pretty clear picture, and it's really nice setup. What also you need and this is all kind of dependent on like how you want your thing to look. If you want it to look more industrial and like less flashy, then like go ahead and like just spend the bare minimum of money and you can make all this work. You can also make it work if you're very smart technically. You can make this work without spending a lot of money either. But for actors, there is an investment, and that's sort of the way to look at it too, though, as an investment. It can set you back depending on what you're doing. So, but most people have a phone, so as long as you have a very recent phone that has a good lens on it, you'll be okay in that department. You also need lighting, and that's very important. I bought myself a ring light off of Amazon. It comes with a clip. You can put your phone into it. That cost me about $20 to $40. Like, it wasn't very expensive, but it drastically changed how everything I do looks. I also got myself a microphone that you can clip on to your clothes, and that one cost me about $60. So really, all I really spent, because I got the phone so long ago, I'm not going to include that. The things that, like, so basically, I spent less than $100 on 2 essential pieces of equipment. I haven't bought it yet because I don't need it yet, but I think I'm going to invest to it probably next paycheck. I'm going to get myself a green screen that I can set up in my room. And the green screen, the lighting, the microphone, and the phone or iPod or whatever you got to use to film it. If you're an actor during the pandemic, you already have most, if not all, these things, because this has been the standard for auditioning now for the last year and a half, because we're all filming at home. But this also all works for your own personal projects as well. Again, if you're gonna, like, let's say, like I said earlier, you want to do a bunch of monologues and put them on YouTube, which people have done. That right there, those 4 items, all you need. That's all you need to do all this stuff. Now, I have a friend coming back for the summer, and me and her like to work on projects together. She's another actor, and we're already sort of thinking about filming some stuff over the summer. And that's going to change things a little bit for me, and I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. But now I'm thinking to invest in like an extra mic, or unless we're just going to do reverse shot, which is kind of boring and kind of amateurish, but I also, the way I picture it in my head is that it can also be very funny if we do it the ways I'm thinking. So that's another thing I might be working on this summer, depending how our schedules work out. But yeah,
another COVID summer.
Another COVID summer, yeah. But I mean, this is me all buying stuff that's sort of like bottom to middle range. Like I spent more on the microphone because my sound quality was more important to me, and I knew a little bit about lighting already. So just buying the ring light that I bought, I knew was going to be enough. If you want to do something more professional, because I know that a lot of actors, especially nowadays, a lot of younger actors are influenced by social media influencers, and
like TikTok,
like your TikToks, but TikTok's different. Like kind of like more like your Jake Pauls and your Lele Pons, like those types of people. Yeah, I know, I cringe at it too, but it's the way it is. They spend a lot more money, and so if you're looking for something that looks closer to that kind of stuff, you're going to need a heavier investment. Just your phone will work for a lot of things, because what the hell was the name of the movie? There was a movie that was made a couple years back. It was all filmed on iPhones, but the lighting was a bit in certain scenes, and the sound was a bit in certain scenes, but it's doable. You just have to know, again, your technical knowledge just has to be a bit more on point to make that kind of stuff work. But I think if you're looking at this as a long-term thing, if like you want to be an actor and you want to make your own stuff, invest in lighting, invest in microphones. And I would even argue, because one of my teachers, he still uses a Handycam. I'm actually still looking for one myself, because the newer model ones do look really, really nice. And they serve, in my opinion, I think they serve a better function when it comes to filming stuff, just because the zoom and everything works much better. And if you're going to make comedy, which a lot of people do for internet stuff, you're going to want your zooms working, because hilarious slow zoom ins are always going to be funny. I don't care who you are, they're always funny. So yeah, it's a bit more of well, I mean, I don't know how much an animation tablet is, but it can, like for acting, I know it can get very pricey. And also, you don't have to buy everything at once. You know, like I said, I haven't bought my green screen yet because I had a blank wall I could use, but now I'm going to rearrange my room, so I think it's time for me to invest in the screen.
Right. Yeah, no, you can definitely space it out. I mean, a lot of animators who are working in 3D don't need pen displays at all. They just need a mouse and a keyboard.
I didn't know that.
Right? It's only if you really need to draw on the screen, or you find that that's an easier way of working, that a pen display becomes more your flavor. If you do a lot of drawing and concept art and illustration work, I mean, you're probably already going to know about it and already have one. But if you're working in 3D, and especially if you're working in a 3D studio, oftentimes it's just you're given dual monitors, a keyboard, and a mouse. The end. It's only if you have like special requests for a pen display that the studio will usually be like, okay, here you go. But yeah, for 3D animation, it's absolutely not necessary. But if it's something that you like, then give it a try. Yeah, why not?
That's great.
I wanted to ask you, though, about editing. So once you shoot it and you have your lighting and you have your microphone, you have your sound, all that good stuff, what about editing? Because that, for a lot of people, can be a gateway too, right? Or like a gateway in the sense where it's like holding people back, a gatekeeper, I guess.
Don't be intimidated by editing at all.
I just mean price points.
Oh, price points. Okay. If you're a Mac user, you have an easier time, because I believe all Macs, and even like my iPod that I use, it already has iMovie on it. And I do believe all Macs already have iMovie on it.
Proprietary, right?
Yeah. So you're going to be okay. iMovie is probably one of the best ones out there. Actually, I think I've heard it is the best one out there, but I'm not hardcore into the editing scene. I just know what I know. iMovie's pretty straightforward, especially on my iPod, but I'm not doing anything super fancy with that. It's usually just for auditions, which is a lot of just like cuts and fades and all that. That's all I'm really doing. So it's pretty simple to grasp.
Are you using a Premiere?
No, I just use the standard. But if I was going to edit an entire film, I would invest in a different program. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I'm not an editor. What I found very useful to learning how to edit, and what I found useful about the editing world, is just simply YouTube. If you go into YouTube and you go editing software, they're going to show you a whole, people will have reviews of it. Then they will show you, this is how this program looks, this is how this program feels, this is how this program runs, here's the things you can do with it. And they're like, if you're just looking for basic stuff, it's the easiest way to learn. Just go and check that stuff out. Then start filming your own stuff and start experimenting on your own. And that's how you're going to figure out other techniques. For my computer, I just use Windows Media Maker. And again, I'm editing together demo reels and stuff, so I don't need anything too technical. It's pretty straightforward, everything that I need to do. But again, if I was doing an entire film, I would invest in a different program altogether.
Yeah, you're going to want something that lets you do like multi-channeled editing and stuff like that. I'll just chime in a little bit because I do editing on the animation side of things. Premiere is good. It's probably one of the best in-house. Only problem is that it's Adobe, and so it's expensive, and it comes with a subscription model. Like the price tag is usually the gatekeeper for a lot of people. But there are other ones like Final Cut Pro and Sony Vegas. And I remember when I was making my classical film in school, we had the school had a professional editor who would edit the student films, and the student would get to sit in the director's seat and, watch over the editor and see how he works, and he'll give up suggestions, and you would be able to say like yes or no and that sort of thing. And they used Final Cut. His name was Rob Wood, and he'd been an editor for like 30 some years, and so he knew what he was doing. Trackball, mouse, and all. One of the ones that I've been using recently is another open source and free program called Shotcut. It gives you access to multi-channel editing. The only real drawback is that you can't drag and drop your channels to be higher or lower. So if you're layering things, it needs to be pretty precise in that way. But I mean, for something that's free and open source, the end result you get is pretty good. I just wanted to talk really quickly about making time for your personal projects again. I find that as an individual, I'm much more creative in the mornings, but that for me is problematic. And the reason why is because I start work at 8 a.m. and my kids are usually up at 6, right? So if I want to do anything that's creative and I want to do it by myself and have alone time or whatever, I need to be either up before my kids or doing it before work, both of which require some difficulties, because if I want to do it before work, then my wife has to take over the parenting duties before I go to work. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's an illustrator and content creator his name is Jake Parker, and he has 5 kids. And he was able to write, draw, ink, color, publish an entire graphic novel, as well as a bunch of illustration books on his own with 5 kids. And this is kind of where my mindset kind of comes from, is that it wasn't about finding time, because time is always there. It was about making time. And so he was that person that would wake up before his whole family and work on this project until everybody started waking up, and then, do the parental thing, and then go to work, and then at the end of the day, parental thing again, and then go back to it, right? And so that's a lot of commitment, and that's kind of what you need for these personal projects, is you need that sort of drive and that commitment. But I'm going to put a but in there again, and it's just, you want to make sure that this personal project, as much as you want to get it done, it's something that you're still enjoying, right? You don't want it to feel like work. There are some days, sure, where you're going to have to kind of force yourself to sit there and get started. But once you get started, usually you're having a good time and things are kind of coming together the way you want them to. Just finding a way to make time for yourself. Because I can't have that time in the morning that I want, because I need sleep with 3 kids, and waking up before them proves to be difficult and something that I can't sustain for long periods of time. I might be able to do it like once or twice a week, but it's certainly not something that I can do every day yet. Maybe when my kids start sleeping in a little longer, it'll get easier, but they're still quite young. And so for now, when I work on my creative projects, it's usually late into the evening, and it's a planned day. And I make sure that I plan those days ahead of time, because then it gets like, oh yeah, I'm working on this tonight. Great, perfect. Like, I have the time, I have the hours. It's just it's scheduling the time, making the time, because the time is there. You don't find time. You don't spend an hour doing something and then suddenly be like, oh, hey, there's 10 minutes. You don't just accumulate it. You have to make the time to sit and do it. It's too bad that I'm only learning these lessons now that I've entered my 30s and not when I was in my 20s, because I feel like if I had known or learned these things in my 20s, I probably would have been able to produce more content then like I'm doing now.
And that's something that I want to kind of touch on a little bit is you don't want to get yourself overwhelmed, which is basically exactly what you're talking about. You can have your commitments, see your friends, see your family, do all those positive things for yourself. Don't feel like you have to do 600 things a day, because you really don't. You're just going to burn yourself out, and you're going to end up either being terrible to hang out with, miserable to be around. You're not going to be sleeping properly because you're going to feel that you have all these things that you didn't finish that you're supposed to finish. Like, the key thing, like you've mentioned it, I've mentioned it, it's all about scheduling. It's all about timing. Like, again, I pick the weekends and I say, for this hour or for this half an hour, I'm just going to write. That's all I'm going to do. Get it out of my system, then move on with the rest of my day. It all depends, like, what kind of weekend I have planned. But what's weird about that, actually, is I noticed that during COVID, I did the, like, least amount of writing that I've ever done. And it's just, like, I don't know. I think it's because I got comfortable with the idea of not doing a lot, which is, I think, a bad thing to get comfortable with.
I don't think you're alone in that boat. I think that, like, the pandemic fatigue has kind of set in for everybody, and everybody's just kind of tired of being tired and tired of not being able to do anything. And
I kind of put up to the false hope they gave us at the beginning. They're just like, oh yeah, 2 weeks. It'll just be 2 weeks. And then a lot of us are like, oh, okay. And then, like, this kind of, like, slowly kept on pushing it longer and longer and longer and longer. But we kind of kept that mentality of like, oh yeah, 2 weeks. So, like, oh, whatever, I'll just play video games all night. Who cares? Because I know, like, that was a big...
Yeah, it'll be a nice break.
Yeah, right? But I know for me, it was like I didn't stop playing video games, but I just kind of, like, limited down, like, a lot. Like, I was doing a lot more personal stuff. But then once, like, the pandemic hit, it was like, okay, well, I'll get those personal stuff done pretty early on in the day. What am I going to do? I can't go out. I can't do things. So I'll just do what I can do safely at home, which is play video games. So I started playing more games and more games. And now I'm slowly weaning myself off of how many games I was playing again, which is nice. And I'm hoping to get back to the point again where I spend more time, like, outside. I spend more time lifting weights. I spend more time doing more fulfilling things, because I don't find video games very fulfilling. They're just very fun, and it's fun to waste time with them from time to time, but I don't get as fulfilled out of them as I would as working on myself or working on personal projects.
Exactly. You want to get that personal fulfillment, that you time in. It's important to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's, you talk about getting outside and doing those things again. I sit in my office all day from 8 till 5, and it's in a basement, so I don't have tons of sunlight coming in, and it's out of necessity, really. My kids are young, and so if I were to move my office up into, like, a sunny room upstairs, they would just be like, hey dad, hi dad, how's it going, dad? And I wouldn't get any work done all day, which is cute. Don't get me wrong, I love my kids. It's just I have a job and I need to do it.
Well, you love your kids so much that you want to work your job so you can pay for them to live. So,
well, yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, but I mean, it's also why I have to go for a run.
Yeah,
or I have to go for a bike ride, or I have to get outside. I have to do stuff outside. So one of the things that's been driving me nuts lately is because I don't get to run until later. So the sun is going down. So I'm wearing my sunglasses a lot of time, and I wear a mask when I run, because that's, it's mandated. And the way that my nose clip works on my mask, when I take a big breath out, it fogs up my sunglasses and I can't see anything. And so I just take my sunglasses off for most of the run, and I just put up with the bright, blinding glare, because it's worse to have the fogged up sunglasses and kind of see. I'd rather just almost be completely blind.
See, I was very fortunate during this pandemic because, like, my job never stopped. They just reduced hours to keep us all separated and stuff. So I was still working all the time, so I was still able to go outside. Like, even though it was, like, for short bursts of, like, just walking into a car and then walking out of a car into a building, it was still nice to, like, not be stuck at home all the time. And now, because of my nutritionist and this plan that we created for me where my lunches are basically protein shakes, now I can actually use my lunch break to go for a walk by the lake by my warehouse. And so I'll just go hang out by the lake, drink my protein shake, and then walk back. It's very nice. I'm very fortunate to
That sounds magical. I'd love to go for a walk by a lake by my house.
yeah, I understand. I'm completely fortunate in this, and that's why, like, I try to be humble, try to keep it down, but it's fantastic. I'm very happy to be in the position I'm in that way.
I'm going to finish on a couple things here just about personal projects and social media.
Okay,
So,
but just so you know, I have a question after you're done this.
oh, okay. Well, maybe the question is more pertinent now.
No. The question can wait till the end.
Okay. So, with social media and personal projects, one of my recommendations is to do your best to keep your personal projects off of social media if you're posting your personal project for attention. The personal project, in its name, in its very nature, is something that's meant for you, right? Something you're creating, and you want to share it with other people. Yes, that's great, but don't be making your personal project or catering it just to get a like or a follow or a share on Facebook or whatever. The personal project that you're making should be for you. And when you're creating it and you're sharing it, it'd be like, look at what I've been working on, you know? If you want feedback, it's okay to post it on, and you get that feedback if you're looking for it. But if you're posting it just to be like, look at this and look at this and look at this and like this, follow me, subscribe here, do this, then it becomes much less of a personal project and a creative endeavor, and it honestly becomes about like Instagram like farming kind of thing. We spoke about it in another podcast where I was on social media for a very short period of time, but I found that a lot of the art that I was creating was pandering. I would see that this piece did better than that piece, and so then I'd gravitate more to making more of the other kind of piece, but it was the other kind of piece that I had more fun making. I just want to make sure that people know that your personal projects don't have to be plastered all over social media to be fulfilling. You don't have to have people liking your project and sharing it with 1 million people for it to be, something great. If it's something that you enjoy making and it brings you joy, then it's already worthwhile and it has quality to it.
Yeah, I can understand that. The only thing I have to question that aspect is, or at least let me create a little scenario. Maybe this will help explain what I think better. Like, let's say I'm an artist and I had an idea for a manga I want to draw. And so I'm just drawing like the main character constantly and putting it on my Instagram all the time, just to kind of get people to see if people are interested in it. But I never actually fulfill myself making that manga. I just keep on drawing the same like 1 or 2 people all the time in different poses. I feel like that's your like farming. But I feel that if you're already deep into the project and you're like, okay, this thing's going to launch in a couple months, I want people to know about it. Here's a picture of me on set. Here's a picture of my characters, and like start to build the hype. I think that's a different thing, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's very true, right? If there's an end product,
yeah,
and something that's ready to be launched, and it's you're advertising for your personal project, that's absolutely different than being like, here's a character, here's a character,
okay,
here's a character, here's a character. It's just what you want out of social media. Do you want constructive feedback, or do you want followers?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to grow as an artist, or do you just want to pander to a certain crowd or a mass? I'm not saying that you can't do both, but in my experience with creative projects, I found the more I was involved in social media, the less I was inclined to make stuff that I like. And the more burnt out I was feeling because I was trying to crank out content all the time. Right? And now I'm working at my own pace and I'm making things that I really enjoy and I'm sharing things with people and I'm getting good feedback. But I'm not doing it because people are following me on Instagram. I'm not even on Instagram. You're 100% right. If you're getting ready to launch something and do something and you're promoting a product or something that you've finished and worked really hard on, then yeah, by all means. But if it's just like what I was talking about before, then yeah, for me, that's not something I would bother doing.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that distinction was there. So this kind of leads me in a little bit into the question I want to ask. I have this crazy question for you. So outside...
And maybe I have an answer.
I hope you got an answer. So outside of animation, do you have any other kind of personal projects that you're working on?
So beyond my own personal animated project?
Yeah. Are you building something?
Uh,
Are you painting?
I do illustration, and I am working on children's books, but those, because I'm not on social media, I'm not, these things aren't public,
Oh,
and
for
I'm
sure.
not posting them. Yeah. But I do other things. I like to illustrate. I have my own shirt store. Maybe at one point I can share that with everybody, but right now it's not super important. Yeah, I am working on children's books, and I do t-shirt designs and a few other things on the side. But beyond animation being my personal project, one of the other things that I like to work on is a board game. So I've been building a board game for a while, and I'm trying to get that up and running. And so maybe you'll hear about that in the future. But for right now, it's mostly just, my own personal animated project that I'm working on. And then maybe eventually a board game at some point that's based on the animation that I'm working on.
So for me, within the last couple of years, I got really into tabletop games. I felt like there was a part of the market that was missing. So over the last couple months, maybe 3 or 4 months, I've been sort of creating in my head a tabletop game. And the part I'm enjoying about it, and the part that kind of relates to me, to sort of back to what I'm already kind of doing on my own personal projects that I've done before, is I'm spending a lot of time creating the world, like writing the world of it in my head to kind of get an idea of like the pieces or the way I want it to play. So I'm creating so I already kind of like, I knew that it's going to be like, a tabletop war game, do this, and that with it. So what's this world that's surrounding it? And that's sort of what I've been creating. And I would say that that's like the endeavor I'm doing that's sort of outside of my realm. It's probably the closest to writing, but definitely nothing to do with acting. So it's just different realm for me. And it's been enjoyable to think about a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a few people that we know that could probably really help you with that.
For sure. Once it kind of gets closer or a little bit further in its stages.
Once it's a little less nebulous and you can kind of pull it more out of the ether.
I just don't want to give out too many details of it. This is actually
it's fine.
This is actually the most I've shared about projects I'm working on. I usually keep them pretty quiet till I'm ready to like actually give someone a physical thing of it. So like even like talking about the short stories and the poems and stuff, I normally don't talk about that with a lot of people. I keep that very hush hush. And this is the first time I've talked about the tabletop game. I've been keeping the secret for months. So
nice.
yeah.
Well, I hope that we get to hear more about it in the future.
Oh, I hope so too. That'd be awesome. Let's just go wrap things up now. I think we've hit the natural wall here.
Yeah, I think that's warranted.
Yeah. So I think just to kind of wrap everything up and do a nice little bow, when it comes to your own personal endeavors, just make sure you don't overwhelm yourself. Make sure you give yourself time to live your life, to see your family, to see your friends, but then give yourself that time to work on your project in a healthy, creative fashion. That's going to help you not feel overwhelmed. It's going to help you not burn out, and it's going to help you kind of live a fulfilled life while also pursuing these things on the side that are very important to you.
Yep, exactly. After you've taken care of yourself, it's very important, like you said, to schedule time for your personal project. Because if it's something that you really want to make and something you're passionate about, you really want to have a story told and you want to tell it your way, you definitely have to put aside some time and schedule it to make sure that you can work on it. Because nobody's going to do it for you. In the creative world, nobody's going to hold your hand. There's lots of tutorials and videos you can find to help guide you, but the hardest part, honestly, is going to be getting started for most people. And then we've talked about it on many podcasts so far, is just finish your thought. So once you get started, see it through. Even if it takes you months and months or years, you'll be happier that you did. And make sure that you make that time for yourself and then for your personal project.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for us today in the Frames for Thought podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming along. Again, I am Mark, your actor, and with me,
Alex, the animator.
Thanks, everybody. Have yourselves a great day. Much love.
We'll see you next time. Bye, guys. The Frames for Thought podcast uses royalty-free music from Track Tribe and RKVC. Thanks for listening.